I wouldn't be here today without humor. If I didn't have humor, they would have found somebody else to talk about humor to you today. Humor changed my life. I joined Toastmasters in August of 2006, 8 short years ago, to overcome my fear of public speaking. I joined Toastmasters, which didn't work out too good for me in the beginning because you have to speak. I only spoke 6 times in the first 18 months. So I figured, being an engineer by degree, that I would go learn more about speaking, and that will help me get over my fear. And I went to a humor boot camp in February of 2008. And that's when I hit rock bottom in my journey to overcome stage fright. They taught us all these formulas on how to write jokes. And if you're here for that, you need to go downstairs to the first floor, conference room C, and they're having their joke writing workshop. But I wrote a simple 2-line joke, and I was supposed to go up and say it to the class. And I couldn't do it. My mind went blank from the stage fright. So they said, well, pick up your paper and read it. And I picked it up. And my hands were shaking so bad, and my knees were shaking, and my voice trembled, and I somehow got it out. And at the end of this 2-day workshop, they did a debrief where people talked about what they learned and what they experienced. And I literally had to hold back the tears of frustration because it's not that hard. People do it all the time. They get up in front of people and they talk. But I couldn't do it. And it was recommended that I go to an open mic and get a laugh. And if I could just get one laugh, then it would help me get more comfortable in front of people. Well, I didn't do that. But I did see an ad about a year later to go listen to Judy Carter talk about comedy. And it was really a 4-hour sales pitch to sign up for her class. And I don't know what got into me. I guess she's a good salesperson. But I signed up for that class. And I didn't pay attention to the fine print, was that the graduation would be all the students, if you met their quality level, would get up and do 5 minutes at the Hollywood Improv. And let me tell you, I was never more afraid that day before I went on stage and when I was on stage. But when I was done, I was so exhilarated. I got 2 bad knees, and the green room was upstairs, and I flew up those stairs. I was on such a high. And from that point forward, speaking to an audience has been a lot less. And I started speaking more and more. I started competing in every contest. And Bonnie asked me to come here today to speak about and to encourage you all to compete in the humorous speech contest. And I'll explain why in terms of helping you grow as a speaker and why it's good for you as a person in dealing with life and everyday situations. Now, Mary in the back, who just spoke, we know each other since early 80s, right?
Yes, yeah.
And when you heard my intro, would you have thought back then that any of that was possible?
No way. No way. Never say a word. I get off topic.
And Eno here, who will be on the panel discussion later, she was there as I was preparing to go on stage at the Hollywood Improv. We'd met while I was on this journey, while I was in this, where I knew a lot but couldn't do a lot. And she can vouch for what it was like, and she was actually in the audience at the Hollywood Improv. I can't tell you what a difference that made. So, how many of you, by show of hands, think you can be funny and deliver a humorous speech? Okay, all hands should go up. And hopefully when I'm done, if I ask this question again, I'll see more hands. There is no one way to be funny. Mary's style is quite opposite John's style. John is very quiet with his motions, very low-key, soft-spoken, but delivers punchline after punchline, well-written material. Mary has lots of jokes, very animated. I Enno keeps telling me I have no personality when I'm on stage. But you go with what you got. You make jokes. You can make fun of yourself. It's all about being in the moment, dealing with the situation, and putting a twist on a normal, everyday situation. Jokes require a setup, and then there's a punchline. You want to end on the punchline. If you notice John's joke about the color, right? It's like, well, I didn't want a white one. It would show the dirt. You know, you wouldn't say, well, you know, things get dirty in the ground, and that's why I don't want a white coffin, right? That's too much, and the punchline doesn't work. But when the way he told it, it worked. Mary's joke about seeing LA, if she had said that, you know, we were so, we could see LA, we were so high up. That's not as funny as, we were so high up, we could see LA. Right? You set up an expectation, and then you change it. I was interviewing a comedian yesterday on my radio show, a guy named Shane Michael, and he talked about being a comedian is like being a magician. It's sleight of hand. You try and lead people in one direction, and then when you shift it in another direction, that's where the funny comes in. And I'll offer to everybody in the room, if you write a speech, I will take a half hour to review it and give you feedback and show you where you could put in the humor. And I'll do this for free. And if you don't like what I give you, I'll give you your money back. It's not that hard to be funny. You just have to, it's a learned skill. There are things like, there's the rule of threes, where you give a list of 3 things. The first 2 set up an expectation, and the third one takes it in another direction. You can use that when given a normal speech and trying to provide information. I'll give an example. If I were to give a speech to a class about what the causes of World War I were, I happen to have thought about that this morning. There was an acronym I used to remember. They were militarism, imperialism, and nationalism. And then there were also entangling alliances, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, and some Europeans just don't like each other. Again, it was a list of 5. I turned it into 2 lists of 3, and on the third one I put in something that was nonsensical. It got a laugh. If you're teaching this to a classroom, they would chuckle, and they're likely to remember that more than if you just gave them a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is one way to put humor into your speeches. A lot of times people will use time in a sentence. For instance, if I say, I discovered the cure for AIDS last week at UCLA Medical Center. That has no impact because the important fact I discovered a cure for AIDS was at the front of the sentence. If you say, last week at UCLA Medical Center, I discovered a cure for AIDS. You put the punch word in a joke at the end. When you're giving a normal speech, even if it's not funny, you put the punch thought, the most important point at the end. Maybe when you're writing an article, you may put the important facts at the beginning, but when you're speaking, you always want to put it at the end. So review your speeches and put the punch thoughts at the end of the sentence. Another thing with humor is all around in everyday situations. Mary found humor in a trip. John found humor in contemplating dying. It's all around. You just have to think about it and you put a perspective on it. I was traveling to the Toastmasters International Convention in Mashantucket, Connecticut, and I had a very short, what do you call it when you got to catch one plane? Layover in Dallas. And my plane was delayed because of a broken footrest in first class. And I'm sitting there stewing about it, saying, I'm going to miss my plane. I'm going to miss my plane because of a broken footrest. I mean, no planes ever crash because the first class people had a broken footrest. And it turns out that at that same convention, getting from the airport, which was about an hour and a half from either airport, either in Providence or I forget the other one, but people were taking these shuttles, and the shuttles were breaking down. They were late. They weren't there. They went to the low-rent shuttle company, and people had a miserable experience. And our district governor at the time, Joan Lewis, her travel was the worst. She had problems coming and going. Her flight got delayed coming back to LA. Well, I turned that into a speech, and I ended up competing with it and getting pretty far along. Anything can be a speech, and the topic of your speech should be relatable to your audience. One of the things we're taught as speakers is to know your audience. It's even more important when you're trying to get a laugh. In Mary's speech, when she talked about It's Snowing Men, how many of you are familiar with the song It's Raining Men? It was in the disco era. Okay, a handful. Those of you that didn't, you laughed because Mary was just animated. To those of us that are familiar with that song, it was even funnier because that song was part of the setup for the joke, right, Mary?
That's right.
So when you're giving a speech to an audience and you're going to give examples, those examples should be relatable. And you'll get better feedback on how relatable your examples are if you're trying to be funny. So by writing humorous speeches and delivering humorous speeches, you will learn how to better develop your understanding of your audience. And stories are everywhere. I can give you some examples. When I did stand-up for the first time, I was wearing braces at the age of 50. And people would look at me and, oh, you just want to look cute. And I go, really? I get up in the morning, I'm bald, I'm 50 pounds overweight, and I look in the mirror and go, oh, these teeth, they could be a little straighter. So that's some, having braces. What goes on? If you just pay attention and then think about it and put a little twist on it. It's not that hard if you practice. Anything is difficult if you don't try, and realize you're not going to be perfect the first time out. I didn't speak in the beginning for those 6 times in 18 months because I wanted to get up and be perfect on stage. Well, I wasn't, and I could have waited forever and I would never have been perfect. And when I came back from that humor boot camp, I developed the mindset that I'm going to get up and speak as often as possible, and once I get that behind me, I'll learn from it and I'll be better the next time. So I encourage you to come up with a story from your life. Look for opportunities to twist it. And you have what's called artistic license. If you're dealing with a character in your speech and you describe them, and in reality they may be your height, if it's funnier for them to deliver that line being a lot shorter, then make them shorter. Nobody else was there. It's supposed to be funny more than truthfully accurate. Or if it's better that the woman who yelled at you was 6'5", then make her 6'5". That's your choice. And you could try it one way with one audience, another way with another audience, and see what works. So hopefully you can see the difference that humor has made in my life. You can be encouraged to compete in the humorous speech contest and take a stab at it. If you lose at your club contest, you don't lose, because you'll have given the best humorous speech you've given to date, and the next time you give it, it'll be better and better, and you will advance to the area and the division, and who knows, you may be a district champion. But you're not doing it to win the trophy, you're doing it to get experience, and the only way we grow is by doing. So I think that's it. Mr. Postmaster.
An overload of applications for the speech contest. We want to be able to have 2 or 3 meetings just to take care of everybody that wants to compete, because you see how important it is.